You're okay, ma'am. You're safe now. Can you look at me?
They're still out there.
We'll take care of it. Right now, we just need to get you warm.
Dispatch, victim located. We're heading back to the vehicle.
Easy does it. Lean on me.
I have to make a new opener, but I like that one.
I do too.
So, welcome, everybody. Tonight we have a really gruesome murder that we're going to bring to you, again, from the 1800s. So this one's called Murder in the Tannery, and it's a bonkers one. But before we get going, I wanted to apologize for everybody. We missed last week. We were just uber busy with everything in our lives. And
holidays.
Holidays and stuff going on at work and personal stuff. And it was just really, really hard for us to find a time. And yeah, we were both kind of worn out and just decided, you know what? We're going to come back next week and give you guys a story. So yeah, this one happened November 8th, 1874, and it's pretty gruesome. So let's get into this. So on that date, the remains of Herman Schilling, who was 25 years old, and he worked at Henry Freiberg's Tannery, was discovered by his co-workers. The tannery tanned animal skins, so that's what the tannery does. So So after
I was just scared to ask you, like, what is a tannery?
What's a tannery? Exactly. So after the animals are slaughtered and the hide is removed from the meat, the hides go to a tannery, and that's why we have leather boots and leather purses and all of our leather goods, belts and whatnot. So the skins are tanned, and there's different ways to tan them. There's an acid that they soak the skin in and then bring it out, and it cures it so it won't decay. Or in some countries, they use urine, animal urine, to tan them. You can always tell. Because you smell the leather and it smells like urine. So that is
true.
Yes. So if you get
Argentine
leather or Mexican leather or something like that, and you smell it, particularly after it gets wet, it'll have a little bit of a rank urine smell. Urine tan leather. So
all right.
Brazilian leather, get Italian leather, get American leather, because it's got a different tanning process. It'll last for a long time, and it's really soft and supple. So he worked at this tannery. Now, back in the day, this area, let's see, and I'm trying to remember exactly where this was. I've done so many murder cases the last few weeks and got them ready to go. This was kind of a bad area now, and forgive me, I can't remember exactly what town this is. I want to say it was something like Milwaukee or something like that. This was a really industrial portion of town. So you had the slaughterhouses, you had manufacturing plants, and it's the 1874s. There's no air pollution control devices. There's no sanitation. It's nasty. It's smelly. It's dark.
Ew.
It's gross. So let's get back to old Henry here. Poor Henry. His body was discovered by his coworkers. Okay. When the workers arrived, they found signs of a struggle and a bloody stick, like a big stick, and a pitchfork. And they found parts of Herman. Oh, it was really, really bad. And police were immediately called, and they found Herman stuffed in a furnace. 25-year-old kid. Okay. Sorry, but he's a kid in my eyes. So the gruesome details of the story went kind of worldwide almost immediately. I mean, and I found this in newspapers all over the world.
That's crazy.
Because it was so gross. It was so bad. One writer called it a murder so atrocious and so horrible that the soul sickens at its revolting details.
Wow.
Yeah. So what they found was traces of blood that led from a stable to a distance of about 100 feet to the boiler room. And the stable was absolutely splashed in blood. There was blood everywhere. And it was a really small stable. It only had room for one horse. And it had I'll tell you how they used the horse. But the horse Henry cared for it, and he would groom it, and he loved it, and even the owner took really good care of the horse. The horse was an important part of the process because they used the horsepower to, like, you know how they had grinding stones at one time?
Yeah.
They kind of used the horse for a process like that. So they had to take care of it, make sure that it was well fed and its legs didn't hurt. But I'm sure it was lonely. I can't feel bad. It was living in this really gross area, but still. So they find the stable. I know me, I go overboard.
I totally get that, because I would much rather have my animals. I love animals, so.
I mean, the radio plays in my barn, and they have night lights, and they have artwork.
You guys, her animals are seriously spoiled. So
very much so. So what they find was the stable splashed with gore and resting against the wall of the stable. And it was stone. From what they described, it was like stacked stone stable, real nice. They find a 5-pronged manure fork smeared with blood and hair, and a heavy pine stick, like a real big pine stick, was soaked with blood and found on the stable floor. And the horse was absolutely trembling in fear, was just standing there shaking because of what it saw and the violence that happened around it. And they had in the tannery at night, the owner and Henry would let 2 huge mastiff dogs loose, and they patrolled the tannery to keep people from stealing anything. So during the day, the dogs would be chained so people could come and go and they wouldn't hurt anybody. But at night, they were let off the chains. And Henry actually lived at the tannery in a room. He had a room by the stable. So he worked there. He lived there. He cared for the horse. He probably cared for the dogs. He was a nice kid. Okay.
Yeah.
But Henry had some problems. We'll talk about them. So they figured the perpetrators chained the dogs because Henry wouldn't have chained the dogs. That wouldn't have happened. So at 7:00 in the morning, that morning, Cornelius Westbrook, who was a tanner, had come into work to groom the horse in the stable. And he said he found the gate locked, which was surprising because Herman, sorry, I keep saying Herman Schilling was the kid that was killed. It's Henry's tannery. Herman, he found oh my gosh. He found the gates to the tannery locked, and he said that was really unusual because Herman would get up in the morning, and the first thing he would do is unlock the gate so everybody could come to work. And when he unlocked the gate, he would go next door to the owner's house. The owner had an apartment, like there was a big apartment building, like right adjacent to the tannery. Can you imagine the smells?
Ew, no.
Yeah. So he would eat his meals with Henry Westbrook's family. Okay. So Herman would always go up there and eat his meals with them. And so Cornelius said he comes in, the gates are locked. So he unlocks the gate and he shouted for Herman. He's like, hey, come here, or where are you, kind of thing. And when a boy from the apartment building next door popped his head out a window and he said, I shouldn't wonder if Herman wasn't killed last night. Strange thing to say.
That's a very strange thing to say.
Yeah. So he calls the boy over and he's like, tell me what happened last night. And the boy joined Cornelius and they started searching for Herman. And he explains that he had heard a fight the night before and had called out for Herman, but his answer was pretty much silence. He explained all of this to Cornelius and said that he had seen shadows, like people in the yard and near the stable. And it frightened him. He yelled out for Herman, but it frightened him. And so he just shut the window and was like, I'm done. And he's a kid. So he and Cornelius started searching, and that's when they discovered Herman had been stuffed partially into a furnace. And the boy ran to get the police. So the way
he ran.
Yes.
The poor kid.
Right. So what they had was a furnace built, and then it had, which would power the boilers, right? And there was this door into one of the pipes that where all the heat came out into the pipe. There was a door in there, and it wasn't very big. They described it, and they had a little like artist rendering of this thing too, but it sounded like it was like an 18 by 18 inch door, not a very big one. It's so they could get in and clean out the soot or something like that, right off the furnace. And that's where they found his body had been stuffed into, was this 18-inch kind of door into the tube that came out of the furnace. And they found his head and his trunk were burned beyond recognition. There was almost nothing left of them. Only his legs sticking out of this pipe were intact. That was it. And they knew it was Herman because he's missing, and they all recognize like that's his legs and his shoes. You know, you work with somebody day in, day out.
Yeah.
You're like, so a lot of people started gathering outside the tannery. They said like a few hundred people came up to the tannery gates, and the police were trying to keep people back. People started milling around. They were talking about the brutal crime. Okay, here. The tannery was located in Cincinnati's northern outskirts. And they said it was deemed grimy and filled with slaughterhouses and soap factories, which was made with the tallow after slaughtering. Boiler fabricated. It was just, they said it absolutely was filled with blood and smelled horrible. The whole area. Just bad. There was rows of shanties that the workers lived in, and then grimy apartment buildings, all just in this nasty, grimy little section of town. And so you gotta know that. I mean, you're not talking about bankers and attorneys and nice proper. These are people who worked in terrible conditions, doing terrible jobs for pennies, eking by a living, and it was bad. It was just really, really bad. So there's a man named Andres Egner and his teenage son, Frederick, and their friend, George Reuter, who ultimately were arrested for the murder of Herman. Herman had one point lived at Egner's saloon. Andres Egner owned a saloon and boarding house kind of in the same area. And he was kind of a rough guy. He was not a well-liked man, and he was really rough around the edges, and he treated people pretty horribly, and he was kind of immediately a suspect, but he remained silent after the arrest. However, his son Frederick started singing immediately. So, several months before the murder, when Herman lived at the boarding house, he developed a relationship with a girl named Julia, who was Andre's daughter. Yeah. So she was 15 years old. And I know what I would do to your daughter's suitor if this happened to her. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. So Andre caught them in bed together. And Herman was a lot older than Julia. And Julia became pregnant. Okay. He accused Herman of seducing his daughter, and he started beating him with pieces of an oak barrel. The pieces looked like big oak sticks because they were the slats. That's kind of what they found at the barn. Was an oak stick. Okay. He was arrested for assault and battery, and he was fined $50. And Andre swore on the day he was arrested that he would kill Herman. He developed a plan, and he enlisted his friend George and his son Frank to help them with this plan of taking Herman out. And George, was just his buddy, so he's like, "Sure, I'll go out. I'll help you.
Ride or die. Let's do it.
That's
Let's
it.
just go
Right.
into life, like."
Yeah. So they found Herman on Saturday, November 7th. And they attacked him with one of these oak planks from the barrel. They strangled him and then stabbed him in the abdomen several times with a pitchfork. That had to be excruciating. When they
Yeah.
killed him, they shoved his body into the furnace, and they believed that the body would be completely consumed by the fire. But there was a problem because the furnace was not operating at the temperature that it normally does on Sundays or on Saturday nights. They allowed the furnace to go not be fed continuously because Sunday was kind of an off day. So even though some of the tanners would come in, they weren't doing a full-scale business on Sundays. It was odds and end pieces and things that they needed to finish up. And then they would stoke the fire early Monday morning and get it really roaring. So had they done this on any other night, but Saturday night when the fire was allowed to kind of burn down, he may never have been discovered had they got his whole body into that tube.
Yeah.
He may never have been discovered. Yeah. So the next day when the workers came to the tannery, they were met with this grim scene, and police learned after arriving at the tannery that a man named George Roofer had been fired the day before, and that he blamed, that was George. That's George. That's Andrus's friend, George. He'd been fired the day before. And he blamed Herman for the reason why he was fired. He laid it all on Herman. He's like, he's been running his mouth and he doesn't like me. And Herman lives here, so of course you're going to fire me, that kind of guy. And so the police immediately went to George's house and met with his wife, who said she had no idea where he was that night, So she claimed initially that George hadn't left the house after dinner, but then she changed her story and said she accompanied him to the home of a friend, returning home around 10 p.m. And then she said, well, I really don't know where he was that night, So she's a gal too. Henry's remains were claimed by his only known relative, his brother Frederick. Dr. Malley, who was the coroner, performed the autopsy and took lots of notes that were used in the court case, obviously. But I feel really bad for his brother Frederick. I mean, what a horrible thing. Let's take home a little box of legs and shoes.
Yeah, that's just horrible.
Ugh. So George takes off. Okay, so now he knows that they're looking for him. Because word is out from his wife. And so George he took off. And they finally find him. He's not a real smart guy because he's standing on a street corner in another section of town. And they're like, are you George? Yeah. And they took him in. Okay.
Yeah, that's not really, I mean, if you wanted to hide,
Right.
I would have left
He's
down.
not a smart man. They asked him to strip down and they examined him for signs of a fight. His clothing were fairly clean, except for, which is weird, they say his underdrawers were stiff with blood. Like he had like he had blood all over his underwear. And he explained that the blood was from the hides he had handled at work the day before. Like he had gotten new jeans on, but he still had blood on his hands. And so his underwear had blood all over him. And so it didn't make any sense to anybody. They're like, what are you talking about? And then, and that tells you how much a lot of these people shower or bathe at all.
Yeah.
When asked about his whereabouts the night before, he stated, after I had a couple of beers about 9:00, I took my child and started home. I stopped at so his child was with him at the bar. I stopped at a grocery store at the corner of Logan and Finley and took a couple more glasses of beer and one glass of wine, and then I went to bed. This morning I got up about 7, and after breakfast I started to walk to Columbia to see the superintendent of a furniture factory about getting a job. I couldn't find the superintendent as the two men told me he lived over the river. I met no one in Columbia that I know, and I started to walk home after getting some more beer. I got tired. I got into streetcars and rode to the Elm Street Depot, and then I started home where I was arrested. That's a lot of words for basically he went out to look for a job and drank.
Yeah.
And drank some more.
That's a very well thought up story.
When he was asked about Herman, he said, I didn't have any trouble with Schilling. I last saw him dressing hides when I left the tannery last evening. He had been in a habit of working at night. I don't know where he slept. I once heard Egner talking to Schilling about what he had done to his daughter, Julia, and Schilling ought to be, and Schilling said he ought to be run through with a pitchfork. So this guy just couldn't shut his jaw at all. Like he's just like volunteering all this information, and he's immediately ratting out his friend, right?
And so oblivious to it.
He went on to say, another time I heard his son Fred talking about the same thing, that Schilling ought to have a rope tied around his neck and be held over the hot furnace. So there you are. So George had scratches and bruises on his face. Under his right eye, there were several scratches, and it looked like he had been in a pretty serious fight. So he's arrested. Absolutely. After speaking to George, police were immediately suspicious of Andres Egner and his son Fred. And knowing that Andres had beaten Herman with a piece of wood months before, and seeing a piece of wood on the bloody stable floor, they're like, yeah, no, it was the Egners. So they went out in search of them. Andres was born in Germany and came at the age of 26. After the Civil War, he married and he opened the saloon. And when his daughter was 14, he started having her work behind the bar to help out. Apparently, she was really friendly and would serve drinks and play cards and was described as pretty jovial, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And she started flirting with Herman because he was probably one of the youngest men around her, right? That wasn't a brother. And his room that he rented was next door to Julia's. So one thing led to another. Yeah. So when Andres found out about the relationship, it absolutely exploded. And he was, like I said, he was described as stern. He beat his daughter severely over this. Like he just beat her half to death. Oh, man. And then he threw her out of the house. He absolutely threw her out. So now she's 15 and pregnant with nowhere to go. And then he sent out looking for Herman. Okay. So Julia, this poor thing, she lives on the streets after being thrown out. She turned to prostitution in order to make money because that's the only thing she could do. She didn't. Yes. She could work in a bar, but she's 15 and 18, 58. She can't do anything. She doesn't have skills. No. She probably wasn't educated at all.
No.
So as she's actually hospitalized before Herman was killed. I mean, it took months for Andres to actually get the nerve together to kill Herman. She ends up going to the hospital and she dies in childbirth. And when Andres heard about her death, that's what was the last straw for him. That's when he flew into a rage. He's not angry that he threw her out, and he's not angry about how he treated her.
Yeah. And like, you don't think beating her up and throwing her out and having her turn to the life that she did had
nothing to do with it? And how many times was she beaten by the men? She was.
Yeah.
Like, so unfortunately for Herman, he never left. He could have gone anywhere. He could have gone, I think his brother lived in like Lexington or something like that in Kentucky. He wasn't even in Cincinnati. He could have gone to his brother's. He could have gone anywhere, but he stayed there because that's where he knew that was home. And he stayed in the town where his indiscretion with Julia took place. And Andres was fuming. And so after he loses Julia, that's it. He's done. He's going to kill him. He's had it. So police questioned Cornelius, the man who came in that morning and found the gate locked. And he said Herman left his house. He had been over at Cornelius's house the night before he was murdered, and said he left his house about 10 on Saturday night, saying he was going to go to bed after tending to the horse. And then when Herman didn't arrive for breakfast with the people who owned the tannery, they got suspicious and sent Cornelius out to look for him. That's why Well, he's like, he gets to the tannery and the gates are locked. That's even more suspicious. So he's like, oh,
Yeah.
no. So the last time anybody had seen Herman alive was probably when he was with Cornelius the night before. Police believe the perpetrators knew Herman's pattern and knew he would be in the stable prior to going to bed. And it was apparent from the bloodstains that Herman tried to hide behind the horse where he was attacked, because that's where the greatest quantity of blood was in the stall with the horse and on the wall behind the horse.
That poor horse.
I know. So they used the furnace to burn wet tan bark and sawdust. So the burning of these gases passed by a flue, and the gases go through the flue and into a boiler. And this flue had this door that opens for cleaning. And that's where the police said Herman was not a large guy. He was a pretty small guy. And they couldn't believe that they got any part of his body in there, particularly his shoulders. So like trying to get his shoulders in there, that would have been very hard to do because the flue door was so small. But they did. They got his head, shoulders, and the trunk all the way to the hips into that flue. But there wasn't enough room to keep pushing him in there.
Yeah, that's weird though. I'm like, what they do? Like take parts off to get him halfway in there?
I don't know. They said, and like I told you earlier, Saturdays the fire's not stoked, so it was almost molten. So that's why it was hot enough when they put him in to burn most of his body, but then the fire started burning down. Like the gases would have combusted his body, but the fire was burning down Saturday night. Had it been any other night, they probably wouldn't have found him. The furnace door had blood on it. The space inside the door that leads to the floor was covered in blood. 10 feet from the door in a pit, there's a pit that's about 8 feet deep. And that's where the tan bark is kept. Like they'd have like horse and buggy, like trailer loads brought in this tan bark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they used for the fuel for the furnace. And it was in this area, in the pit with the tan bark, that they found parts of Herman. As parts burned, they'd fall off and fall into the tan bark. And had the tan bark not been wet, it would have been combustible. But it was too wet to burn. So,
Ew.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So they finally locate Andrus and his son Frederick and arrested them. And Andrus's house, they locate his hat that he always wore, covered in cobwebs. And they go back to the barn and they looked in the stable with the horses, and all the walls have cobwebs with tan bark bits in it. And it matched the cobwebs with the tan bark on the hat that was Andres' hat. So put him at the scene of the crime. And during the trial, George was asked about the blood on his boots and his pantaloons. Yeah. And he then changed the story and said that he'd been at the slaughterhouse the day before and the blood must have gotten there during his visit. And they're like, what'd you do? Take your jeans off at the slaughterhouse? I mean,
right?
Yeah, it was so weird. It was just so weird. The state called Otto Ness, who testified that she heard Egner tell his wife in the kitchen that he was going to go over and give Herman such a beating that night that he would remember it forever. Niece worked in the saloon and heard threats that Andres made against Herman for months and said that Andres threatened Otto if he'd ever spoke against him. So, he's bullying everybody.
Yeah.
Andres took the stand, but seemed pretty unfazed about the proceedings. And he didn't seem upset about his son. He immediately became a choir boy and was singing like,
This is what we did and how we did it.
This is what we did. This is how we did it. The jury, no surprise, declared all three guilty of murder. It was written about Andres that it was curious to observe the change in the prisoner's demeanor in this announcement. His feline eyes brightened his face again assumed a strange, cynical smile so characteristic of the man in moments when most human beings turn pale. When the verdict was read, the crowd in the courtroom cheered, and Andrus smirked at them. They were sentenced to death. In 1884, Governor Charles Foster commuted Andrus' sentence. It was believed he was dying of consumption, but he lived another several more years. He ultimately died in 1889, and it was said that at the time of his death, he was a raging maniac. I couldn't find anything else on George or Frank, whether they were put to death for the crime or eventually paroled or when they died. People do say that the tannery that is still apparently the building is still there for the tannery in Cincinnati. And people claim to this day it's haunted. And they described a black skeleton seen walking the ground.
Okay, that might be a little freaky to see.
That's a little freaky.
That's a little freaky. But that's crazy. It's still there.
It's still there, the building. Yeah, if you've been to Cincinnati, it was kind of interesting to me. I lived across the river in West Virginia for a while, and it's an interesting place. There's a lot of rundown areas now in these cities, and yeah. I mean, a lot of those places, you know, cities went through a revival for a while. And they would clean up these old places and make them dance clubs and place for artists to hang out and all kinds of stuff like that. And then they fell into a state of decay again. So I don't know I don't know exactly where it is. It'd be interesting if I was ever back there again to try to find it.
It'd be cool to try to find it. Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that in these old articles, they talk about the haunting, the black skeleton seen in the.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
I just love how the old articles are so graphic.
I have to tone them down for YouTube.
I know, and that's crazy.
Yeah. They didn't get their feelings hurt like everybody gets their feelings hurt now. Like everybody's always kind of, oh my God, you can't say. Yeah. You can't say that.
You're gonna, no.
Yeah.
I know. I think it's awesome, but I mean, the world was completely different then, and it was.
Oh man.
I mean, and so I can understand where the father was coming from as a 15-year-old. I mean, granted, and back then it was so different that young women did get married, but you defiled her. She's no longer pure. She can't go get, because that's about that time frame.
Some articles actually mention that she had a lot of maybe some mental illness going on, but then other articles didn't mention it at all. And I don't know.
I'm kind of wondering maybe if they all did.
Well,
I mean, but to be able to go do that to somebody, I couldn't. And I don't know what it is about the pitchfork thing, but I'm like, that just terrifies me. Like I hate pitchforks. I don't know why. Maybe it's like all the movies I've watched in my life from like childhood or what. No,
I know.
I'm like, it's kind of like
them every day, and every day I'm like, oh yeah.
No, I mean traveling behind like the log trucks. Final destination. Here we come. It's like, oh no, we're just gonna burn.
Yeah, scary movies have done it to us. But I feel sorry for Herman. He was a young man who. I mean, he shouldn't have done what he did, but I get it. I understand it. They were two young people, and they were attracted to each other, and it sounded like Herman had kind of a wandering eye a little bit, but he was also a young man who wasn't married, and
he was a young man, and you had a young female who also was flirting. And we've had this conversation before that we've just seen way too much in our life to always just blame the man.
No. She sounded pretty flirty and chatty and
maybe a little promiscuous.
Oh, maybe a little bit. I'm betting there was some of that there. It helped sales of the bar. I'm sure it helped the beer. Yes. So I mean, the beer was flowing.
But then as a parent,
he shouldn't have put her in that position, and he put her in that position. So, and then he put a young man who's renting a room from them right next door to his daughter.
I mean, you're asking for a recipe for disaster there. And then, but as a parent as well, I mean, and like you said, if it was like my daughter, like, I probably would have done the same thing. Just because, And
Yeah.
that's kind of like looking back at my life, and I'm like, yeah, that was not okay. Why was that allowed?
Yeah. So there you have it. That's our murder in the tannery. And rest in peace, Herman. If you are the skeleton walking around, which you probably are, I hope that's someday that you find some peace. So,
Yes.
yep. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging in with us tonight, and we'll bring another case to you next week. I hope that everybody, by the time we release this recording, it will be right after Christmas. I hope you had a wonderful holiday and got to enjoy it with your family and friends. Until next week.
Yes. Bye, guys.
Bye.